This is Nasha Kasha, Ukrainian Almanac, 28 minutes of stories about Ukrainian life. I'm your reporter, Stefan Andrusiak. Nasha Kasha comes to you from the campus of Western University in London, Ontario, Canada, and it is heard on 12 campus and community radio stations in 7 provinces from Newfoundland to Saskatchewan. And this is episode 138. This story begins with a remark I made to a jazz musician about his instrument. I first met Marshall Harridge at the McGill Faculty Club. He was part of a jazz trio playing background music at a fundraiser. In between numbers, I remarked to him that his bass, which looked like it had been around the block more than a few times, probably had a good story to tell. That chat garnered me an invitation to hear Marshall play the very next time I would be in Montreal. It was on a Sunday during a rare December downpour. I stepped into a cozy cafe, ordered vegetarian chili, the band took a break, and Marshall pulled up a chair.
Hi, I'm Marshall Harridge, 24 years old, from Vancouver, BC, living in Montreal, Canada. How you doing?
Just great. Thanks for inviting me down. You know, I walked in here feeling kind of drippy and gray because the thing I'm wearing is supposed to be a shell to protect me from the rain, but it's pretty drizzly out there. How are you doing?
I'm great. Had a good weekend, played some gigs, playing with some friends right now.
Tell me where we are.
We're at La Luncheonette on, I think is this Sherbrooke?
This is Rue Saint-Jacques.
Yeah, Rue Saint-Jacques. It's a brunch gig that some of my friends play every Saturday and Sunday, and I'm just subbing in on bass, just playing some jazz standards, and it's always a good time.
Okay, you're in Montreal in the Saint-Henri district, but you didn't grow up here. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in a small town called White Rock. It's in BC. It's about an hour south of Vancouver. It's on the U.S. border and the Pacific Ocean, and it's a small little town, very beautiful city. Moved out east for school and for music pursuits and studies, and we'll see what happens next.
Can you talk a little bit about your heritage?
My dad's side of the family is British, so it is of British descent. Yeah, somewhere way down the road, probably like 1800s, but my grandfather and I think his dad's moved to Canada, so it's a long ways down my bloodline. Yeah, my mother's side is Ukrainian, so she says. I think way down the line as well. I think both of them have been in Canada for a very long time. Yeah, she's Ukrainian.
Is this something you recently discovered? Or?
Yeah, so my mom's side and my grandma and I have 3 aunts, 2 uncles. They're all of Ukrainian descendants, I believe. I found out only a couple years ago because I just asked. I was just curious. I never...
How did that conversation come about? How did it start?
I don't know. I think it was just my curiosity. I just asked. I knew, like, forever I knew that I was of British descent because heritage was pretty obvious. But, yeah, it was surprising to me. I had no idea that I was... Do
you know your mother's maiden name?
Yeah, it's Galka. Galka. Yeah.
Tell me about growing up in British Columbia.
I grew up on the Pacific Ocean, so my whole childhood I was fishing and just very outdoorsy. Played a lot of sports as a kid. It's just a great place to grow up.
What kind of sports?
My first love was baseball. My parents were kind of pushing baseball, and I played soccer. My dad was a very big soccer fan, and basketball. I was like semi-tall, so I was decent at that. I played rep soccer for most of my childhood, and baseball was, I'd say from when I was like 7 to 15, baseball was my main focus. And I was playing on a very competitive team in a competitive league, and that was kind of my passion at the time.
Tell me about music and how it entered your life.
Yeah, it was actually a complete coincidence. It was actually, I think I was 8 years old at a baseball camp in Oliver, BC. And one of the instructors had a guitar, and he was just playing like Blackbird by the Beatles or like some Beatles song. And I was just in awe. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And then I got home from that camp, and I told my parents I wanted to get a guitar and start lessons.
How did that translate into you coming to McGill and graduating at the Faculty of Music?
So I was playing guitar in my early childhood, and when I got to high school, I started playing bass in a concert band. My high school had a really good jazz program, and there was 2 teachers in particular who really pushed young jazz artists and developing this program, cultivating musicians. And yeah, so I was in concert band till grade 10, and the girl who was in grade 12 jazz band in that year quit, and my instructor asked me to play double bass, which I never played before. And I picked it up and just fell in love with it and started taking lessons. And it wasn't until actually like end of grade 12 where I decided I wanted to pursue it in post-secondary studies. But it wasn't for this girl dropping out, I probably never would have even touched the instrument.
Why the stand-up bass?
It's an unconventional, bizarre instrument to begin with, and as I said, it's a complete accident. Like I never would have thought of picking it up and playing it, but I just fell in love with it. It was kind of like fate or something. But in a jazz setting, upright bass is, I think, quintessential and very key. And it's a good setting for it because you can explore it in more of a solo and kind of an unconventional bass sense, because mostly bass just plays bass lines and like supports the ensemble, which is true in jazz as well, and it's also a major component. But in a jazz setting, you have solos and you're more open to express yourself on the instrument. I'm doing a master's at McGill right now, and I did an undergrad in Toronto at Humber College. So I had 4 years at Humber, and I kind of was just in the shed and just practicing vigorously. I decided I wanted to do a master's, and by the time I applied to McGill, I felt like I was already like pretty comfortable on the instrument.
Why a master's? Why take that extra academic step?
I was at a point in my life where I was just thinking about my future and deciding. I talked to a lot of my old professors in my undergrad program, and they recommended getting a master's if I want to teach someday in like a post-secondary institution. They encouraged me to do it, and especially do it like while I'm young, like right away, because a lot of them had regrets that they did it in their 30s and 40s and they wish they did it earlier.
When we first met, it was by happenstance. You were part of a trio playing at a Ukrainian event at the faculty club at McGill, and I noticed a hole in your stand-up bass, and it looks a little bit distressed, and I came to you saying that there must be a good story. So tell me the story of the bass and how it came into your life.
So this is an old Romanian bass, I think, or Eastern European bass. It's been passed around. I think it was originally set up to be a classical bass. That's why it's so big. It was my old bass teacher, Neil Swenson. He's a really renowned Canadian, North American jazz musician. He teaches at Humber College, and I started with him for a year or two. I was looking for a bass at the time, and he kind of had this bass sitting around in his house. It was his backup bass. I tried it out and fell in love with it. And also, Neil was one of my role models, so the fact that I could have one of his instruments was also very cool to me. So I decided to purchase it from him.
Can I ask how much it cost?
Yeah, it was $15,000.
15,000.
15000. I think the luthier was experimenting with sound. Most upright basses actually only have one chamber, but this one has two because there's a piece of plywood that runs down the middle of the bass. So there's two separate chambers, which makes the sound resonate in a different manner. I don't know if it helps it, if it's distracting, but I think, in my opinion, I think he was just experimenting and like trying something new. There's a bunch of holes in the back, which is very weird. Every bass player who looks at it always comments on it and is like, what is that? But it's kind of cool. Like, I don't know, it's kind of a unique thing. I've been in Montreal for about a year now, meeting musicians and networking and kind of being a freelance bass player.
Can you make a good living as a bass player?
Not really. You need to explore different avenues and stuff. I'm in my last year. It's a 2-year program. It's 100% performance. and there's a strong emphasis on composing. For our thesis, we have to record a CD of all original compositions as a band leader. So that's what I recorded last week, and that's what I'm going to be releasing in the spring.
First thing in this report, you heard Marshall playing with Valerie Lacombe on drums and Michael Bruzis on guitar. And you've just heard a cut from Marshall's about-to-be-released compilation. Sam Kermeyer on guitar, Andre White on piano, Guillaume Pilote drums, and of course Marshall Harridge on the upright bass. The composition is called Leanne, and Marshall wrote it recalling a childhood sweetheart. And this is another one of his compositions. It's called Fast Blues. This is Nasha Kasha, Ukrainian Almanac. We come to you from CHRW 94.9 FM on the campus of Western University in London, Ontario, Canada. Also on CHMR 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland, CKDU 88.1 FM in Halifax, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, New Brunswick, CJLO 1690 AM in Montreal, CFRC 101.9 FM in Kingston, CFMU 93.3 FM in Hamilton, CKMS 102.7 FM in Kitchener-Waterloo, CKLU 96.7 FM in Sudbury, CILU 102.7 FM in Thunder Bay, 101.5 UMFM in Winnipeg, and CFMQ 98.1 FM in Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan. Nasha Kasha is also a podcast. Find it at the Apple Store or at other podcast providers. Just go to the podcast section and type in Nasha Kasha and subscribe. It'll come to you free every week. Marshall Harridge took the time to introduce us to his music, his friends, and his bass. I'd like to take him and you to what might accurately be called Montreal's Ukrainian base. It's in the East End. We're in Angel Zhitinsky's delicatessen, but there are 8 other landmarks in a 6-by-3 square city block area. 2 Ukrainian churches, 1 Orthodox, 1 Catholic. There's a seniors' residence for independent living, a seniors' living assisted home called the Ukrainian Villa. There's a Ukrainian credit union, Desjardins, a Ukrainian Youth Association community center, a park called Parc Ukrainien, a second park nearby, Parc Beaubien. This is where they host the annual Ukrainian Summer Festival. And just beyond this hub, a second Ukrainian Orthodox church. This day, the day I visited, was January 5th, 2019. Angel Zhitinsky is chatting up her regulars, carrying on a business her grandfather started in 1922. Among her customers, a McGill grad from the very same faculty where Marshall Harridge now studies the bass. But first, I speak with an assistant credit union manager, also a mother. She is rushing home to prepare Ukrainian Christmas Eve supper for her son. Yes, it will be a day early, for her son is a Canadian soldier, and he is about to leave for Ukraine.
I'm having guests at 6 o'clock for Svetvechi.
I can be there. I can be there.
3 little questions. Go for it. I'm going to serve Panyuri.
Can I ask you to self-introduce? In 3, 2, 1.
Marta Meyer.
And Marta, your son is flying off to Ukraine tomorrow?
Yeah, he's with the Canadian military. He's in Project Unifier. Right now it's a training mission where they're in Ukraine. They're training the Ukrainian military. He's been there since September, and he's going till April.
Your son grew up in Ukrainian customs?
Plus, the Ukrainian school, the whole works. He's second generation, but he still speaks Ukrainian.
And you say he's flying off to Ukraine to be a part of a military venture.
Yeah, this is his second time. He was there in 2016 already.
Does his Ukrainian speaking help him?
Yes. He also his Russian also improves when he goes.
You're going to be saying goodbye. How do you feel about? Do you worry or?
No, the training mission. It's just that he's not anywhere near the war. He's training the troops in the Lviv area right now.
Is it okay to ask his rank and his name?
He's a warrant officer, Matthew Ramsey.
Wow, so warrant officer, that's the tie between the enlisted men and the officers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I recently met someone who has discovered his Ukrainian roots. If someone were to explore them a little bit further, give him some insight in what being Ukrainian is, or what the greatest thing about being Ukrainian is.
Well, it's part of being a smaller community in a large city. It's home, friends, it's family. There's different organizations. There's great food.
So someone who's just exploring that feeling or that knowledge that this Ukrainianism is in the past would feel comfortable?
Sure, why not? I invite him to Malanka. Tell him to come. It'll be a good party.
Malanka is the Ukrainian
New Year. It's on January 12th this year. He might enjoy that. Get to meet a lot of young Ukrainian people.
Okay, have a lovely time tonight with your son. Okay, Papa.
Wish your son a safe trip. Have him come back home soon.
Yurko Kulitsky from Montreal.
And Yurko, what do you do here?
Well, I work at the Ukrainian credit union, Desjardins Credit Union, and basically manage the credit union here already for quite a few years.
I recently met a young man who's a musician. He's a jazz musician. You're a musician by background as well. He plays a stand-up bass, and he's recently discovered that he's Ukrainian. And I thought to myself, it's a gray day in Montreal. He's from the West Coast. He's living in Montreal. What would warm him or maybe encourage him to take a few steps closer to being Ukrainian?
Well, that's a real good question. And having been a musician myself in the past, my memory goes back in time, and I say to myself, what were the interesting things that Well, I discovered most interesting stuff by talking with people, so probably would encourage him to attend and socialize a bit with people of Ukrainian background here in Montreal, who could tell him stories of where they came from, where their parents came from, what their parents went through, what they've gone through, depending on what generation they're from.
Is there a Ukrainian Students' Union?
There are two Ukrainian students' unions, as a matter of fact, at McGill University and Concordia University, and they're quite active, and a bunch of dynamic students there that have good parties, but also have good events that promote the Ukrainian culture in Montreal. Yeah, that would be a good idea. I'm sure he could get in touch with other musicians, which probably would be his first interest, but just like students of Ukrainian background from all across Canada at McGill and Concordia.
I sense this young man is smitten with Montreal, and I think that your words of encouragement may just give him a sense that, well, let's explore this Ukrainian thing, at the very least, to come to this end of town.
Yeah, absolutely. He'd probably appreciate what interests him the most if he's a musician and an aspiring, or probably a very capable musician, bass player, would probably be the music, and which the Ukrainian musical tradition is so rich and diverse, and so many musicians have come from Montreal, and so, if he catches a path there, that probably would be cool for him,
You're a musician.
Well, I played in a very well-known orchestra for quite a while in Montreal. I graduated from McGill University and played piano and arranged for a group called 1945 here in Montreal, a group that's still going strong. And I did that for a few years, like I think 23, 24 years or so. And that was a blast. I got to meet Michael Bublé. I got to meet Robert Charlebois, David Foster at one of the events. Yeah, so it was really exciting.
Did you study performance as you were doing your studies in music?
Yeah, I studied performance and I studied music theory as well. So the full scope. Yeah, and then I just started off a band as a hobby that lasted about 24 years.
Because that's what he studied. Can you just reflect on the role musically of stand-up bass in the overall ensemble as an arranger?
Oh my goodness! Well, the bass is the foundation. You say the bass drum. Well, if that's a kind of a rhythm section, or the bass guitar in a jazz quartet, is really both rhythmically and harmonically, musically, the base of the bass is the foundation.
На завершення, чи ви хочете поділитися якими-будь думками про Монреал, про українське життя?
Я не дуже маю багато так, I don't like to preach, але я думаю, що ми мусимо зберігати свою українську ідентичність, своїм дітям передати її і знати, звідки ми походимо, що наш народ пережив і далі переживає. Але також we need to go into the economy. We need to become business people. We need to develop our own businesses. We need to go out there and carve a place out for equal place out for Ukrainians in this world, equal to others and aspiring to the same things that other people aspire to.
Okay, so in Ukrainian you said know who you are and what your history is?
Absolutely. When you know who you are, where you come from, gives you a good perspective of this mystery of a world that we live in.
Thank you so much. It's great running into you, Yuri. Дякую.
Дякую.
I'm your reporter, Stefan Andrusiak. This episode of Nasha Kasha was recorded in Montreal in December of 2018 and in January of 2019. Partial funding for Nasha Kasha comes from the Canadian Foundation of Taras Shevchenko. I leave you with the Denis Dudko Sextet from Ukraine, led by bassist Denis Dudko. Back in a week, God willing. До милої зустрічі за тиждень часу, дорогі слухачі.